Hello and welcome to Steve and Kari's Holistic Buffet with me, Steve Ashton. This is a new intro. I don't know why I'm doing it like this.
Well, we like to keep everybody on their toes. We can't do the same intro every time.
Well, look, today we're going to move focus again. So last month we focused on stress,
Right.
which this definitely is all about. We're going to look back at COVID-19 and what's happened to us in the last 12 months. We've been through a collective psychological trauma, technically speaking. Now, I've done a ton of research for this episode, and I went down some very deep rabbit holes. I've read literally dozens of articles on the Lancet, the British based medical journal website, and also their supplements, the Lancet Psychology, and also the British Medical Journal, to look at the effect of COVID, look at the effect of isolation. One of the things I really wanted to get an idea of was of course, the toll on us at the moment, but more specifically, what is the toll moving forward, and what's some of that residual stuff that comes through. And almost universally, all the reports said that they've cited the term trauma. Now, when we think of trauma, we often think of PTSD or something really horrific happening and then dealing with that as a result. Trauma is different than that from what I've read in terms of how the kind of trauma that we're dealing in this, the mass collective psychological trauma that we've gone through the last 12 months. It's a lot more subtle than a traumatic singular event, which has a very high impact on us. This is something that is kind of, as I say, sort of residual and kind of sits just underneath the surface, but will continue and pervade potentially for years to come. What's been some of the emotions that you've gone through, Kari?
Uncertainty about, how long is this going to last, and what is the impact going to look like long term? Are we going to come out of this with in a year, or is it going to last for longer than that? It makes you think about the next one, right? Coming, the next pandemic, and what that could be like. Scared. And I would say spent quite a bit of time feeling just unsettled, because everything seemed to be stripped down and then put back together. And also for us, both being parents, there was the personal impact. And then there was the impact of what it was doing to our children, right? And having to watch that and help navigate that as well.
Yeah.
We're going through this so that we can take stock. And like you said, it's a renegotiation moving forward. And I like that, because renegotiating as you move forward is a choice. It is a conscious choice. You don't actually have to do it. You don't have to take stock, and you don't have to renegotiate. You can just go back to living life the way that you were living it before the pandemic hit. But I think it's fair to say, and with just about anybody you talk to, that there were certain things that they got out of the pandemic, lessons that they learned, new ways that they chose to live their life and spend their time. And I do think that there is, it's an amazing chance and an opportunity for us to do this.
Definitely.
And I think figure out what our roadmap is for re-engaging with the world now.
Yeah. Our sense of meaning making has been changed, because the way that we relate and deal with the world and other people has changed, because it's suddenly put this extra layer of difficulty and challenge in front of us, which has really shocked our system of how do we negotiate with what's right in front of me. Going to the store, going somewhere to buy the milk and eggs and bread and basic stuff became an incredibly challenging and anxiety-driven event. Our wiring has changed. The synapses in our brain has changed. The way that we make meaning and what events mean has completely changed in some ways. The way that we feel about ourselves, the way that we feel about our friendships and our relationships and our work life and strangers, and even our physical distancing has changed. Our entire ecosystem.
A whole year of not seeing people's full face.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Everybody had a mask on.
Where I live, that's a blessed relief. But but there will be a monumental fallout and psychological longer term fallout and residual stuff.
Sure. Part of these things are still happening. I have in this last month had interesting conversations with several friends about their family dynamic. They haven't seen their parents, for a year and a half.
Yeah.
And people are re-engaging in families and seeing things like, wow, my parents have really aged, or things are different, or the dynamic has changed.
Yeah.
Friends of mine who are having to take their children into the doctor because they're having issues with their eyes that didn't exist before. This is what comes out of doing Zoom school for a whole year. So I think we are still going to be uncovering and processing for a while. And I'm excited to go through some of this work on the show today.
I'm going to do two things about that, Kari. So we're taking stock. Whenever we go through change, there's a process that you can chart. And there's a very smart author in her 1969 book called Death and Dying, called Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And it was really the study of trauma and grief and loss. And she came up with this idea, which is called the pattern of change and transition. The left-hand axis going up is energy, right? So when we first hit some kind of crisis, some kind of trauma, a loss, something that occurs to us that's outside of our control, we get a lot of energy. There's the initial shock. There's the fight or flight response. We go into a stage of denial, which is it's not happening. It's the brain's psychological way of defending against what's happening and basically resisting that change. Then what happens is we start to become aware and start to get that grim reality that this is happening to us. And it can raise issues of anger, desperation, anxiety, fear of missing out, that sense of that real deep sense of the world is changing. Isn't it awful? Then we tend to go into that period of depression where it really hits us and we feel that there's no end to what's going to happen. We're in that position where we're going, when is this going to end? Is this, the end of life as we know it, the end of society as we know it? Also, maybe a sense of apathy, just absolute abject apathy. And I was certainly there in that middle period in summer last year. This time last year, I was definitely there. Like no sense of optimism, no sense of future. Then what happens is something occurs whereby we get used to that. We get almost sick of that. We start to decide that that's not good enough and we don't want to have that anymore. And then we start to experiment with maybe new ways of thinking. We may have a conversation with a good friend who says you're drinking too much. We may have a conversation with work and they say, we're not expecting you to perform the same way as you were, or etc. But so we start to experiment a little with a new normal. Then we start to make the decision that, okay, this is the way things are going to be. And I need to, strap on my big boy, big girl pants and enter into the world in a different way. And then we begin to accept the situation that we're in. And then we can start to move forward. Now, personally, if I look at that, I'm definitely in the acceptance stage. I've been through absolute depression, anger, anxiety, all of that. But I'm now definitely coming out of it.
My cycle going through, I think lockdown was different from yours, right? So when it all first started to happen, in fact, right before lockdown started to happen, I actually had COVID. I had been to the Sundance Film Festival to produce an event and came back and thought I had strep throat because I got this really bad sore throat and a horrific cough. But at the time, we weren't wearing masks yet. They didn't really have COVID tests available at different doctors and urgent care centers. And so I didn't know until after I had it that I had it. And I wasn't a long hauler, someone who had symptoms for a very long time, but I did have symptoms for at least 2 months, maybe 3, because I had the cough for about 8 weeks. And then at the end of the cough, I lost my sense of smell and taste for about 6 weeks also. So for me, I think that there was energy in it and it just kind of smacked me all in the face, right? Because I had COVID at the same time the world was all shutting down. And then I came out of being sick and I was determined to stick to my schedule. My way of trying to navigate through the new world of COVID and quarantine was to not lose one single step. And eventually I lost that battle, as you can imagine, right? I was going to make sure that I kept up with washing and styling my own hair because I didn't have a place to go get that done. And I would do my own nails, and I would, all of my appearance things, I would take care of myself. I would make sure I worked out every day, in my bedroom in whatever way possible. And even though I wasn't leaving the house, I was going to put my makeup on so that when I looked in the mirror, I still, I was going to dress, for work and play the part. And I think that energy started to fizzle when I realized that we were, we weren't going to be done by the summertime.
Yeah.
And so I think whereas you kind of hit your stride towards the end of the quarantine situation, for me, I held it all together at the beginning and then kind of fell apart at the end. And then pulled it back together again. So I went through a dip in the middle.
Yeah.
And I know you're going to walk me through an exercise where I can share in more detail what my life looked like before COVID and after.
Yeah. And we've got another exercise as well, which is with our friend Gemma. Gemma's one of our dinner guests, and we went through a process called River of Life, which is a really good way of charting that sort of general story, just like a little like we've done, but maybe in a bit more detail. It taps into the more, using both left and right brain. So it's a bit more creative than listing what we've gone through. And the reason we use the metaphor of the river of life, and I'll show it you before we have Gemma on, is because just like life, you can't control a river. Things come into your river, different streams join it, make it bigger, make it smaller. And there are also obstacles in the way. It's very difficult to try and control the flow of a river, as it is life. Even with our best intentions, we can't control the direction of where a river goes. You can build a dam, but that water is going to go somewhere. And certainly the energy goes somewhere. So we use that metaphor because it flows. So Gemma came with it to us, and we asked her to do the River of Life exercise and to really chart what's been happening over the last 12 months for her, and just pick out some of the highlights. So let's bring Gemma on. Hi, Gemma.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, Gemma.
Hi.
Looking lovely. Down in where in the world are you? Just remind everyone.
I'm in Dorset in England.
So why don't we crack into it, Gemma? Let's go through, and if you could pick out maybe 4 or 5 of the sort of the big parts that have occurred over the last 12 months for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say that obviously March would be the biggest one at the beginning. Obviously the starting point, because that's when all of lockdown in the UK started. I think globally, actually, March it started. It was also when I decided that I was going to move in with my boyfriend, and I was also started working from home at that stage as well. So that was probably, at that stage, it was all lovey-dovey and all lovely. So it was pretty good.
Very much the sort of honeymoon period, right?
Yeah. It was the early days. Sort of, we'd met each other in December. So like I said, it was quite early days for all of that, really. But we just didn't know whether we would be able to see each other. So it was kind of a risk worth taking at the time.
And quite brave of you, I've got to say, quite brave to make that gamble on something so big. I mean, at the best of times, moving in with someone is a huge decision, but certainly when you go, right, we're about to be on this journey together with all of the added pressures. So well done you for that, for making that decision and for the bravery of getting into it.
Thank you. And yeah, the other thing was as well that he had he still has, but a 4-year-old child. And I don't mind children, but I've never been sort of a particularly happy, childy kind of, like person. So, it took a lot of adjusting to the fact that there was a little person in my life as well. So yeah, sort of jumping forward to September, because although I had a few different things going on in the early, in between months, nothing major happened really. So, but kind of September was when I was kind of, again, I'd been isolated in the flat, and because of being diabetic, I really took the stay home thing very cautiously. I did notice that me and my boyfriend were having quite major issues, and that we were fighting quite a lot as well. I just felt I felt a bit used as a cleaner in a way.
Taken advantage of, right?
Yeah. So this was definitely the beginning of the downward spiral, really.
So at this point, if I can ask, Gemma, if you don't mind me asking, so at this point in sort of September time, you're starting to go, are you starting to make some decisions? Do you feel like at that point you'd made the decision that this isn't going to last, or was it a case of kind of going, let me just get through the next few months and then we'll see what it's like after sort of lockdown? What was your process that you went through at that point?
I think it was kind of like I was going through the second, like you said. So the let's see how we go, get through the lockdown, get through all of this pandemic. The other, underlying thing as well was the fact that I never, because like yourself, Steve, as you've said before, before this relationship, it's sort of been around 9 years prior. Yeah. So, and I kind of just went down on myself, and I didn't really feel as though I was almost worthy of love, because that's how I was feeling at the time. So I don't know if part of the reason why I kept staying was because somebody was actually giving me that affection that I needed. Right. But there was so many other things that were there that I didn't need. Yeah. So, yeah, so
let's put September away. September sucked.
Yeah, bugger off September. Yeah, probably sort of the next one would be mid-October, which is when I made the decision that we were out of lockdown at that stage, and I made the decision that still was going to be the case of working from home, but I was going to move back to my home with my mum.
So what was that? What did it feel like when you went home then? Big relief, I guess.
Yeah. I felt like an elephant had been lifted off my shoulders, to be honest. Yeah. But I also kind of felt embarrassed that I was going home as well. Like, I'd moved out and now I'm going back home. It's kind of like felt a little bit silly, a little bit embarrassed about it, really. But
to who?
I think that was just my own self. Okay. Yeah. So like with regards to my mum, like feeling like, oh, I'm crawling back home, sort of thing. But that was just me being probably
being a human being, right?
Yeah,
it's what we do.
Story you tell yourself that isn't necessarily true.
Yes, 100% definitely true.
So October, you're home, you feel a relief, you feel a bit more freedom, you feel you're connecting better with your support network in your mom and your family. Are you getting a sense at that point that you're starting to come out of things a bit more optimistic about life?
Yes, definitely. The depression had kind of subsided a little bit because like I was on my medication and stuff like that. I was taking the medication I've been on for years, kind of thing. Yeah. But I was beginning to feel more like myself again, more like my bubbly self again, and that's something that I know if I haven't got. Sorry, I've got a fly going around my head. I know that if I haven't got the bubbly side, then I know that there's something seriously wrong.
Right.
So
and do you think that the awareness of your bubbly side disappearing for a while and coming back maybe had to do with the fact that the boyfriend didn't really uplift you as a person and see you as a person, and so it's hard and you kind of lose your support network and having people appreciate you and seeing you for who you are and supporting you is gone, and then you move back home and you have that with your family.
Yes. Yeah.
So you could see the difference between what happens to us when we expose ourselves to people who don't lift us up or, wrap us in love and support. So I like that you saw that, and I like that you characterize it by calling it your bubbly self. When my bubbly self is gone, then I know I'm in trouble.
Right.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
And I like that part of me. You know, I like the fact that I get the silly stuff. But I wasn't getting the same reaction from him.
Gemma, that's what
Yeah.
people love about you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that people love about you. Do you feel, to what degree do you feel you are back where you were before March? I mean, on a scale of 1 to 10, would you say if you were at an 8 before, are you back to being an 8 in terms of just your happiness, your sense of optimism, all that sort of stuff? Are you still a little bit, I'm talking about how you felt before lockdown. Where are you?
I'd say I was probably now higher than I was before lockdown, only because of the fact that I'm working from home.
And do you also think that maybe in the area of self-worth and confidence, you would rank higher because, you know, because of lockdown and because of the brave risk that you took, seeing if you could make this relationship work with your boyfriend, and then it didn't work, you pulled yourself out of it. And you said, no, this isn't working for me. I'm going to an environment that is loving and supporting for me. Do you think deep inside you feel that, and it has given you a bit of a confidence boost or a self-esteem boost?
Yes, I agree with, basically with both of those. It has given me a self-esteem and a confidence boost.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also kind of made me aware that I am worthy of love. So something that I needed to actually know. So that is one positive thing that I actually did get from the relationship, was the knowledge, my own personal knowledge that I deserved it. I think it also kind of made me realize that maybe I do want to have children in the future. So, you know, but at the same time, it would be my child. So I'd be able to kind of, you know, look at it. I was going to say look after it better. I didn't mean it quite that way, but you know, it's kind of like in the sense that it's
Starting from a clean slate, you start from scratch.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hey Gemma, thank you so much for spending time with us on that bombshell. We'll let you go. Look, darling, thank you so much for being brave and for being vulnerable and taking us through that. I think, hopefully you know this, but we both think you're an incredibly open, wonderful, brave, amazing human being, and absolutely, as you have well identified, completely worthy of love. And we love you very much. So thank you so much for being with us.
Well done, Gemma.
Thank you.
Well done.
Just say thank you as well for, you know, first of all, starting this podcast, the Holistic Buffet, because I really have found some benefits from it. But also, you know, thank you ever so much for having me on today as well, because I really have enjoyed this today. So thank you.
Oh, congratulations on your river of life.
Yes.
So it seems like Gemma's coming out with a few more ideas and a really good sense of what has she learned.
I like the river of life exercise because there is something about it, and I'm sure you might be able to speak to this a little bit more. But it's one way to go through it in your head and kind of think, oh yeah, I can remember, and these certain points stand out over the course of a year. But doing a river of life exercise where you actually put pen to paper and write it down provides more insight than you think it would.
And particularly the way that Gemma did it with illustrations and that kind of thing, again, brings in the more creative side. And that's when our brains are most responsive and most productive. So that's a really good way. So first exercise for you to do is to write down your river of life and reflect on it and share that with someone that you feel you can share this type of stuff with, right? And get them to do it too. You know, do yours, show it to them, a close friend, a family member, your partner, your kids, maybe if you've got slightly older kids, and go through that process and just write down, because it enables you to look at the good and the bad. So that's the first exercise. Do that. The second exercise will take you, I reckon 20-30 minutes to do. It's a questionnaire that's essentially like an inventory. And the way we do it is we look at lots of different areas of your life, like relationships, health, the everyday minutia, a career, lots of different areas, and then ask you certain questions about them. And then it's to the degree to which you agree with the statement. It's one of those. And then, so we do that of what you were like about this time last year, or sort of 3 months before lockdown, 3 to 6 months before, right? So like December 2019, around there, up to sort of January, February, March 2020. So around that period, what was your mental health like? What would you have said then? And then what has it been like now? So what's the change between that? So let's say, you know, a statement might be, I feel really happy with the way I look. So back in the first period, then pre-COVID, you might have said, maybe a 7, maybe a 6. All right, I'm going to put 6. What do you feel about the way that you look and your physical appearance now? You might put, actually, I feel like crap because I'm looking at myself more. I've gone down. So then you chart the difference. So what we're looking at is in quite a lot of detail. What would you have said then without all of the pandemic, without all the emotional turmoil, the psychological mass trauma that we've gone through? And then what would you say now? Now, if there's a fall, that's not a bad thing. It means your awareness actually has been raised in those areas. And that's a good thing, because what it means is you're able to make plans moving forward. So if I'm doing some analysis and I'm going, right, what would I have said then? Oh, I'm actually unconsciously incompetent, because that's the process of learning. We are we're not aware of the things we don't know.
Right.
Then we get some information, we become consciously incompetent. And then we do some practice, we get some new information, and then we become consciously competent, and then unconsciously competent, right? So pre-COVID, maybe in some areas of our life, we were unconsciously incompetent, and now we're consciously incompetent, which is not a necessarily comfortable place to be, but gives us room for growth, and it gives us direction for growth. So Kari, you took...
Yes.
How long did it take you to go through it?
30 minutes.
Okay.
It took me to go through it. So I went through it. I went through it all the way, thinking about where I was pre-COVID. Then I went through the whole exercise again with where I feel like I am now. I thought that was an easier way of doing it versus taking self-worth and grading it then and now. I wanted to have my thinking cap on for December, what was it, 2019, and then put a different cap on to go through the exercise again. So it took me about...
Let me recap, if I can, the headers. Is that all right?
Yeah.
The headers are self-worth, well-being, relationships, career and achievements, physical well-being and recreation, my place in the world. So how do you feel in terms of where you are in your life?
Right.
Your financial situation and abundance. And then the everyday, the minutia, the getting up, the brushing my hair, the going, doing my laundry, that kind of stuff. So anyway, that's today's episode. Before we get into dessert, do both exercises, please. Do River of Life. And I encourage you to draw it and share it with someone important to you who you feel you can be vulnerable with. And just reflect back and really, please try and draw upon some of the things that we've done before in terms of values. What are some of those super strengths, superpowers that you've drawn upon to get to where you are now? And look, our mental resilience has been put under an immense amount of stress. And I'd like to think that we're going to come out stronger. The next part really is to look at those areas of your life and say, right, these are the things I've noticed that there's a deficit. And actually, that might be a good thing, because what it gives me some direction to go, I need to get this thing sorted out. The process then is to set some goals around it, right? Is to set some goals and start to look at what is it that I'd like to achieve moving forward? How would I like to shape the way I enter back into the world? One final thing before I go. I was looking in the mirror, right? Obviously, just to make sure I looked okay today.
Yeah.
And I noticed I had a very red face, and it put me in mind of a joke my dad used to say. And he said, you know what? I used to go out with this lovely girl. She's a redhead. She had no hair, just a redhead. And that's it from Steve and Kari's Holistic Buffet, where we give you
a meze for your mind, a banquet for your body, and soup for your soul.
here on Steve and Kari's Holistic Buffet.